The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Round 2 of the Fall Classic here in St. Louis. 4 decisives in Group A, with Setu, Kuzubov, and Lenderman all winning their games. The trio joins Alexei Dreyev in the lead. In Group B, with mate looming, Ashwin resigned to Hafanis Gabuzian. As the leaderboard takes shape, Round 3 starts now. 20 international chess professionals compete in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the second annual Fall Chess Classic. Hello, chess fans, and welcome back to St. Louis. It's day 3, round 3 of the second annual Fall Chess Classic. My name is Ben Simon, joined as always by international master and famed streamer Eric Rosen. Eric, we have 10 games that started the day. We have 9 still in progress.
That's right, and it's raining outside, not the best weather to be outdoors, but very good chess weather. We're staying dry inside, pumpkins are staying fresh, and I'm looking forward to an exciting day of chess.
So fresh. Let's take a look at the standings so far in Group A. We don't have a clear winner yet, but after three decisions yesterday, we do have 4 leaders, 1.5 points at the top. And now let's take a look at the B group. This is after 2 rounds, and you can see up until the start of today, we did have a clear winner in Gabuzian, the 2017 Armenian champion, with Brandon Jacobson in clear second. Now there have been some slight changes there that we'll talk about in just a moment because one game has ended. But a lot of fun so far, Eric, here in this tournament. Let's take a look at the tournament format. This is a round-robin event. There are 2 fields, and the time control is 90 minutes for the first 40 moves. There are 30 minutes added onto each clock after each player's 40th move, and there is a 30-second increment from move number 1. Because of the increment, both players have to take notation from beginning until the very end. And it's also important to note, Eric, that there is a 30-move draw rule in effect. The players cannot agree to a draw before Black's 30th move.
Which is producing a lot of hard-fought games. We didn't see yesterday, but after the broadcast ended, there's a very long marathon battle between Elshan Moradibiadi and Konrad Holtz, which lasted over 5.5 hours. So it's possible we'll see some more marathon battles today.
Fighting chess, that's the name of the game. All right, let's take a look at the tournament schedule. Our broadcast is abbreviated. You can follow these games online at USChessChamps.com every day at 1 p.m. Central Time. We will join you 2.5 hours after the opening bell at 3:30 p.m. each day. And of course, that last day, we're making room for some playoffs starting a little bit early at 11 a.m. Central. Okay, we would encourage you to join us on social media across all platforms. We are streaming live on YouTube and Twitch, and we are taking questions and comments from our YouTube chat, so be civil and be intelligent. And we'll do our best. Join the conversation online with hashtag FallChessClassic.
And I do want to give a shout out to Vert Twitch in the chat, already showing the hammer time emotes. Hammer is a very notorious streamer, and he has some fans in the chat so far.
And there's good reason he has a lot of fans.
That's right.
There's a lot of strong players in this event. Let's take a look at the pairings for today in Group A. We have Alexei Dreyev versus Eric Hansen, Daro Svirts versus Yoon Ludwig Hammer, Var Akobian versus Lazaro Bruzon, Alex Lenderman versus Ray Robson, and Eric, our key matchup.
That's right. Grandmaster Yuri Kuzubov against Grandmaster Sethuraman. 2 players who have 1.5 out of 2 who are sharing the lead so far. And I do want to take a look at their game and see what progress has been made. I want to go back and take a look at the opening. We saw a semi-Tarrasch, which is something you don't see too much at the amateur level, because Black very early in the game gives up the center, allowing White to have these 2 very nice E and D pawns, which is usually something you want to achieve in the opening from early on. And it took me a while to actually understand why this opening is playable for black, because it seems like black is just giving away a space advantage quite early. But the reasoning is that black has this very nice move, pawn c5, after knight f3, c take d4, c take d4, bishop to b4 check. What this does is it forces a trade of minor pieces. And when a couple minor pieces come off the board so early, then the space advantage for white isn't so strong as it would be if all the minor pieces stayed on the board. Now going forward here, both players I think were in pretty reasonable preparation. This position has been played many times before. And then on move 14, black played an incredibly rare move. I was looking at this earlier. The main move here is rook to c8, which has been played hundreds of times before. Black chose this rare move, queen c7, which struck me as a bit odd, because usually in these positions the queen likes to go to e7. And this gave white the opportunity to play a simple move, rook c1, to simply target the queen on the c-file. But Kuzabov did not choose to go for this. Instead, he played bishop to d3, which allowed black this very nice center break, pawn e5. And going forward from here, rook a c1, the queen was able to transfer itself to d6, getting away from the danger of the white rook. After bishop b5, e take d4, e5, and queen g6, we see that black is beginning to organize some kingside attack. The combination of the queen and the bishop glaring down from b7. This looks a bit scary for the white side, and we should note that this knight is currently hanging on d7, but if white were to capture it, then there would be bishop take f3, and this would be a nice trade for black, given that black is keeping the initiative with these mating threats. So I do see that a few moves have been played since queen to g6. Knight h4 was played. Let me update the game and take us to the current position after knight h4, queen g4, and now rook c4. So white is going after this weak pawn on d4, and after knight take e5, rook take d4, queen h5. This brings us to the current position where all the center pawns have dissolved. If I'm counting correctly, black is up a pawn, but it seems like white is better centralized here with these two rooks nicely placed in the center. And play keeps developing. Queen to, wait a minute. Oh, bishop e2 is played, queen h6, queen take h6, and g take h6. And I believe this is the current position. We can take a look at the time situation. Yuri Kuzabov already under 5 minutes to make about 17 moves. So he might be under pressure, but he does have perhaps a bit more activity, and now black's pawn structure is a bit damaged on the king side. So I'm expecting a long fight still to come.
Now you noted that Setu was up a pawn, and then the queens came off the board. Usually you don't want to trade when you're down material, but do you think that Yuri thought that an attack on the d-file by black was inevitable, and that's why he traded off queens?
That's a good question. I think the reasoning for trading queens is simply to weaken the black pawn structure. We can see now that all of the kingside pawns are isolated, and usually double H pawns are not the prettiest structure to have, especially later in the game. And what this is going to allow white to do is bring a knight to f5, or the so-called knife f5, where the knight will be targeting not only h6, but also this very juicy d6 square. And I do like white's compensation here for being down a pawn. And I think black will have some issues to solve. But I think this is a position where it's very imbalanced, and both sides still do have chances.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye on this game. But in the meantime, let's shift our focus over to Group B. Let's take a look at the pairings in Group B today. Now, these games, all of them are in progress except for one of them. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We have Chris Yu versus Sergey Azarov, Steven Zirk versus Akshat Chandra, Ashwin Jaram versus Brandon Jacobson, Danish Borosh versus Conrad Holt, and our game of the day in Group B.
Yeah, the tournament leader, Hovhannes Gabuzian, going up against Alshan Moradiabadi. They had a very quick game. They finished in about an hour, and pieces just liquidated really quickly. I do want to take a look at the opening, though. just to give viewers perhaps some inspiration, something to perhaps consider to play against pawn d4 on move 1 after knight f6, c4, c6, knight f3. This is a common position. And normally, from the white perspective, you would expect a move like d5, just transposing into a standard Slav defense. Instead, we saw a move that I've never seen before until today, this move pawn to b5. Have you ever seen this before, Ben?
No, I haven't.
No, this is it's very strange. Usually you want to look to put your pawns in the center. What this attempts to do is trade a wing pawn for a more centralized pawn. And usually in the opening, the more centralized pawns are of greater value. And Alshon decided to capture on b5. And it was an interesting structure, given that Black now has a very nice square for the bishop on b7 to try and pressurize the position with this fianchetto. And as play developed, it seemed like they transposed into a somewhat symmetrical structure. After pawn e6, knight bd2, d5, we can see this is already looking quite symmetrical. And they actually transposed into what looks like an exchange Slav, where after several more moves, okay, both players developed. And at some point, pieces just started coming off the board very rapidly. Around move 14, knight take b7, queen take b7, and the trades just continued. And at some point, the position got incredibly dry after more pieces came off the board. And it seemed like both players were content with just drawing the game. And we can see here there is nothing much to fight for. Now, I know Alshon has been recovering from some sickness, especially these couple starting rounds, so I'm sure he's happy to perhaps have somewhat of a rest day today to recoup and go into the later rounds with more energy.
Well, and so now that we have seen this game end in a draw, no player in this tournament has a perfect score anymore. It's anyone's tournament in either field, really. I know we're still early on. But what do you say? Let's take a look at some of the other games in this event. I was glancing at Akobian and Berzon in Group A. And there is, I'm looking at the current position, and there's a fork. Let's see how we got there in Akobian-Berzon.
Yeah, and there is a backstory to the start of this game. Berzon had some issues with his cab, from what I heard, and showed up about 20 to 25 minutes late.
That's really close to the cutoff. For the people who don't know, the regulations for this event say that if you are a half hour late, it's not just a half hour ticking off your clock, you forfeit that game. And along with that provision, if you are late for the round period, it says on the website, uschesschamps.com, that you could be fined $500. Now, we don't know if that fine will be applied to Berzon in this case. We understand it was a cab issue, I think. So maybe not directly his fault, so maybe an exception will be made. Really can't speak on that, but that is the rule right now. So he came very close to forfeiting this game.
Right, and we can see at least the current time situation. He's still down on time, but maybe nothing too bad. And thankfully for him, he was able to arrive. And they went into a Nimzo Indian, and Akobian unleashed a move that has been trendy, especially lately, by the well-known American player Fabiano Caruana. Fabiano was playing this quite frequently at some recent events over the summer with very good success. And we can see that, okay, they went into what we have, kind of a Catalan structure, the Catalan being very popular opening at high-level play, keeping a lot of tension. The bishop on g2, not only a nice attacking piece that exerts a lot of pressure in the center, but also can keep the white king quite safe. I do want to zoom forward and take a look at how Akobian developed in the middle game. Knight h3 is not a move that you see every day, especially in queen's pawn openings, but the purpose of this move is to keep the bishop not obstructed and keep the pressure on d5. And as we'll see very soon, Akobian went for knight f4, again applying a lot of pressure, and then eventually went for f3, e4. So let's see how this does play out after a5, knight f4, c6, castling, knight a6, and f3. It's a somewhat unusual setup to put the pawn on f3, but clearly Akobian wants to break down the center with pawn e4, and he did just that after e4, d take e4, f take e4. We can see these two very nice center pawns. And unlike the game I was showing earlier between Kuzubov and Sethuraman, this position features white having two center pawns with all the minor pieces still on the board, and that usually leads to a more favorable advantage for the white side, given that black is very cramped. Especially with the minor pieces, they don't have too many squares to access. Now we do see an attempt to break down the center in this position with pawn to c5, trying to remove the pawn, potentially activate the black bishop. But Akobian just keeps pushing pawn e5, kicking the knight back to d7, and then bishop e3. I really like the opening by Akobian. Everything seems very purposeful, and it seems like he's growing his advantage, maybe taking full advantage of the fact that that his opponent was not at the game on time. I do want to zoom forward here because many more moves have been played. Some trades did take place in the center, but it seems like Akobian is keeping a nice pull in the position, still has more space. The bishops do get traded on in the center, actually. And in this moment, we do see an interesting tactic, rook takes c5, taking advantage of the fact that after rook takes c5, there is bishop to e3, and it looks like things
I was
are.
talking about.
This is the fork, yeah. It's not winning material for black, but simply trading. And okay, many more moves have been played. Let me update the position after bishop e3, king g2, bishop takes e5. We see some further tactics actually in this position. I would encourage the viewers to think for a moment and try and find the pawn-winning move for white in this position. Any ideas, Ben?
So it is white to move here, right?
White to move, and I believe Akobian did manage to win a pawn with a nice discovered attack tactic. You should keep in mind, f7 is a very juicy target.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, I was just trying to calculate through.
And it does require calculation. I'll go ahead and show the first move here. Bishop take f7. Not only attacking the king, but also unleashing the queen along the d file. And we should keep in mind that this rook is now overworked. The rook is wanting to defend the queen, but also wanting to take the bishop. It can't get away with taking the bishop. After bishop take f7, this forces black to play king h8. And after queen take d8, rook take d8, Akobian is now up a queen pawn. It seemed like this combination was perhaps calculated way in advance when all of these trades and enforcing moves took place. And now we should note there are opposite color bishops, which do give black some potential drawing chances. But I do like Akobian in this position, just being up a clean pawn, especially with e6 on the horizon. This e-pawn is going to be a constant nuisance for black to deal with, and especially with the time advantage too. I do like Akobian's chances to win this position.
Have you ever shown up to a tournament significantly late? Doesn't have to be your fault, I'm just saying.
I will admit that it has happened to me. It actually happened in a really important game. I was playing in the 2015 Philly Open. I had thought the round started at, I think, 10:30, but it started at 10. And I was preparing for the game around 10:15. And I got a call from one of my students' parents saying why I wasn't at the board. And it was a really important game because if I won the game, I would clinch my final IM norm. I was 20 minutes late for the game. Thankfully, there was no sort of forfeiture rule if I showed up late. And I actually unleashed some nice opening preparation. It worked out where preparing for the game really helped. I blitzed out my opening preparation. By move 15, I had equalized on time. And I actually won the game with the black pieces and clinched the norm. So I can't say that I've had a bad experience showing up late, but that was the one time I was a bit ignorant for the round schedule. So it is important for anyone playing in any sort of event that you make sure what time the game starts, because you don't want to make any embarrassing misscheduling
Especially
errors.
around here, sometimes the rounds start day to day, different times.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a very important thing to do. Do have to say that Danish Boros and Conrad Holt have drawn their game over in Group B. That is the second game in Group B to finish. I don't know if you want to take a look at that. I know we have a lot of action going on.
We'll take a quick glance. I see a very symmetrical king-pawn ending position. We saw a king-pawn ending, I believe, in the first round between Ashwin Jairam and Conrad Holt, where Ashwin was able to grind down in the king-pawn ending because Conrad had some damaged pawn structure, but we can see this is just a very clear draw. Seemed like the position was relatively equal, even going back a few moves. A lot of things got traded. This is actually a really interesting sequence. I do want to go back maybe to this moment, Bishop e5. I was not taking a look at this game earlier. Bishop e5 looks like it's a pretty enticing tactic, skewering the rook and the queen. However, black does have this pin along the c-file, so white was not ending up winning material. And after bishop d6, really interesting idea that Dennis played here, allowing black to capture the queen on c2 after rook takes c2, rook takes c2. Black currently has a queen for a knight and a rook, but white has the unstoppable threat of rook c8. And black actually has to be a bit careful here not to allow rook c8 and go down material. I believe the only move for black, which was played, is queen take d6, rook c8 check, forcing queen f8, and this is what led us into very drawish endgame. Looks like they played until exactly move 30 and then agreed on a draw in this position.
Okay, so there's still plenty of action left. One thing we didn't look at the top of the show is what's on the line in this event. And we're talking about a $500 penalty perhaps being lobbied toward one of the players. That will be offset, if applied, by the prize fund. Let's take a look at what's on the line in Group A. $6,000 first prize going all the way down. The last 4 spots will get at least $1,000, so no one's going home empty-handed. And in Group B, $14,000 total prize fund going all the way down to the last 2 spots getting $500. So if you finish in last and you're late, you're going home with nothing, in theory. So best of luck to these guys. And we hope we can get some reliable transportation.
Of course, yeah. Sometimes it depends on weather, too. I
Yeah.
know that the weather can slow things down. So, yeah, sometimes you have to check the forecast ahead of time.
Right. Now, one of the nice guys in chess, Ashwin Jairam, he's playing over in Group B with Brandon Jacobson, who is looking for norms in this event. Let's take a look at what's going on here.
Yeah, we currently see a very complex position. Ashwin is quite low on time. I do want to go back and take a look at the opening. This was one of the more unusual openings of the round, where Ashwin is a very classical d4 player. And okay, here we see a ready opening where black eventually does play, or white eventually does play pawn d4. And now black decided to employ the double fianchetto, which if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is called the Hydra system. And I believe
That's a lovely name.
Yeah. Have you seen this before?
I mean, I have tried it. I didn't know that I had a name.
I believe if I'm not mistaken, it might be Vitaly Niemer who is given some lectures on this before, where
Yes, it is.
the setup of the black bishops do have some purpose trying to pierce through the center. The issue for black is that white gains space very early, and after black castles in this position, Ashwin played a very ambitious move, pawn d5, just simply trying to shut out this bishop on b7. And then Jacobson played a very strange move here, knight to e4, perhaps going against some opening principles, moving the same piece twice when he's not fully developed. And the knight seems quite loose on e4. And after knight f2 d2, the black knight retreated to d6. And this just seems like a very awkward setup for black, putting the knight in front of the center pawns. And it's very odd that none of the center pawns for black have moved thus far. Don't see this too often in any opening where only the G and B pawns have moved. Going forward here, e4 is played, and the position just seemed really attractive for Ashwin. Seemed like he was able to keep the space advantage, at least keep the center pawns and complete development. Going forward here, we do see that Jacobson is trying to break down white's structure. This reminds me a little bit of the Cobian game with this bishop pawn battery trying to break down the opponent's strong pawn center. Now Ashwin was even more ambitious here. Rather than perhaps liquidating on c6, he advances further in the center, pawn to e5, kicking away the knight from d6. The knight lands on c4, and then Ashwin continues to dominate the center, queen d4. This is such a basic opening principle in chess, where you want to control the center from early on. It seems like Ashwin is doing just that, with just a very beautiful setup with all the pieces. And black's pieces seem a bit discoordinated in this position. Now, there were some trades that took place on d5 after knight take d5, bishop take d5, queen take d5, rook c8 is played. But white is maintaining the pressure here. Bishop g5, queen c7, and rook e to c1 brings us to the current position. And it seems like a very nasty pin for black to deal with here. I mean, the immediate threat just appears to be b3. And I'm not sure how black is going to escape this, given that the queen on c7 is tied down to defending the knights on c4. So it seems a bit problematic for Brandon. Now, he does have a time advantage, but it seems like both players are going to be getting pretty low on time with still many moves to make until extra time is added.
So this is the current position right now.
I will update one more time, but yes, this is the current position after rook e c1. We see both players sitting at the board there. Brandon seems to be very focused. Ashwin leaning back. Always nice when you see your opponent is perhaps a bit stressed out and you can lean back and just sort of relax. But Ashwin has to be careful not to get too relaxed. As we do want to remember what happened yesterday with his game against Gabuzian. Never get too relaxed when your position seems solid.
Yeah,
so
it was at that very board. And I mean, is it all doom and gloom, though, for Jacobson right here? Because if it's black to play, I mean, can't the queen retreat to, like, d8, and then on the next move you just move the knight?
Well, we have to be careful. Bishop is controlling d8.
Pardon me.
If the queen retreats to b8, the knight would drop. So the queen has to find a square where it's not, where it's still defending the knight. Now, one move that comes to mind is something like queen c6, to attempt to remove the queen from d5. But it seems like white still has some very nice pressure here. Not sure if white would want to go for the queen trade or perhaps keep the queens on the board. We could imagine that white has some initiative, like queen takes c6, rook takes c6, and I'm envisioning either some discovered attack with some idea of knight d4, or even some backward attacking move like bishop f1, given that the knights are aligned on this diagonal. And if we imagine bishop f1, black might have to play b5, and then white has a very principled move, pawn a4. And it seems like in many lines, black will be under pressure. And it seems like this is exactly what Ashwin wants, just a number of possibilities to consider. And when black is under pressure like this, it can really drain down the time. So I do like white's chances in this position.
Okay, well, maybe it's more doom and gloom than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
One of the games in Group A between two players who are winless thus far, Darrow and the Hammer. It looks like black has a pretty significant advantage here. Let's take a look at this game in Group A between Darrow and the Hammer.
Yeah, this is not a game I was taking a look at earlier. We should point out the time disparity. White having just over a minute left to make over 20 moves. I'm very curious to take a look at the opening. I was not taking a look too closely at this game earlier. They did go into a Spanish variation with black playing this very early d5. But sometimes when your opponent attempts to open up the center early with the king still uncastled, it makes sense to try and allow the center to just open up. And we see this is exactly what white does. Pawn to d4, this complete confusion in the center with so many different possible captures. Pawn take e4 played, leaving the bishop attacked, but counterattacking the knight on f3. And after knight take e5, the bishop is taken, queen e7 is played. And now we see an interesting tactic by white, bishop take e4. It looks like the bishop is simply undefended here, but the point is, after knight take e4, again, I would encourage the viewers to find the tactical resource that white has in this position. I'll give a small clue here that this knight is undefended, and so is a rook. Any ideas how white can double attack in this position?
So you mentioned the rook. It got me thinking again. I was thinking rook e1.
Yeah, rook e1 seems like one of the most natural moves to just pressure the e-file, but that's not what white played. White played the nice geometric
d5
move, queen to d5.
Yeah.
When you place the queen in the center, it has so much potential to attack so many different targets. In this case, white is guaranteed to win one of these pieces. Black chose to save the knight and give up the rook. And this actually reminds me of a game yesterday between Ray Robson and Yuri Kuzubov. Ray intentionally sacrificed a rook in the corner, allowing the queen to take the rook. But then the queen got stuck, and then it was a battle to see if there was enough compensation for being down the exchange. Now white is up the exchange here, but the queen was a bit out of play. And let's go forward here, because we see black does get some nice compensation. The knight landing on d3. Very nice in the heart of white's territory. The knights are what we call superfluous. These are knights that defend each other. They coordinate very well in this case. And it seems like black was able to get some significant compensation. I do like this move pawn to c5, perhaps just going for pawn c4 to reinforce the knight on d3. After b4, we see this move queen to d7, which I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of this is. It's possible that the queen is eyeing this g4 square, maybe even planning something like bishop to b7 combined with queen to d5. After white plays queen to e4, black continues the pressure, pawn f5. Very nice move with tempo, attacking the queen. And then after queen h4, black just keeps pushing pawn f4. And now it's the question to the bishop. Seems very uncomfortable for white, given that, okay, the pawn is well supported, the bishop's attacked, and now we see knight to e4, which is a bit strange. I was expecting this bishop takes c5 move to be played, attempting to save the bishop, but now I'm realizing that this would just probably lose material after knight takes c5, b takes c5, and queen take d2, and black would be having two minor pieces for a rook in this case, seemingly a very nice advantage for black. So it seemed like white was actually forced to lose a piece here, given that the bishop is essentially trapped. It's probably why white chose knight e4, and now Hammer is thinking in this position, making use of his time advantage. This is one of the things when you're up on time, your opponent's so low on time, you'll have these perhaps moments where you can just sit and relax and calculate, while the opponent will be forced to play on pure intuition.
It's best to think about your move. It's even better to think on your opponent's time, though.
That is true. It's very true. And I think one more move has been played. We see queen d5 on the board. It just seems like a complete mess in the center. Like, look at this configuration for black. The queen and knights, and now there's attacks on both the knight on e4 and the bishop on e3. Always nice when there's multiple targets, or at least multiple pieces hanging in this case, where now white has to perhaps figure out which piece can be saved. And I like black's setup here, given that there's ideas of bishop b7 on the horizon with an additional target on g2. And even though white is temporarily still up the exchange, I really like black's chances with the current position and the time situation.
Is Hammer just winning?
He could be. I mean, I don't have access to the engine evaluation, but I really like his chances. I think the time situation says it all. We see that Darrow is on the brink of flagging. I see he just played a move. Not quite sure what he played, perhaps capturing on c5. Not sure if we can zoom in there and see. Camera is zooming in. I do see a white piece on c5. Looks like bishop takes c5 was played. And now it's a question to black. I mean, the knight is hanging on e4, but the rook is under attack on f8. And I mean, when I look at a position like this, I would be very much inclined to start calculating these lines with queen take e4, bishop take f8, and then bishop b7, with just a seemingly monstrous attack against this pawn on g2. Looks like the only move for white to hold on would be something like f3. But then after queen e3 check, the king would be forced to h1, and not sure if this is working out actually in black's favor.
Well, knight f2 looks deadly, right?
The problem is white is controlling f2 twice. You would really like to achieve this kind of smother mating idea, but it might take some additional work. I was thinking that black would like to take on f8 here and then have a very strange material imbalance where black would have 3 minor pieces for a rook or 2 rooks and a pawn, something you don't see every day. I think the problem here is white would have queen d8, forcing king f7, and then queen c7, winning back some material. Not sure if black is getting so much in this line. So if we go back to the current position, Hammer is thinking here, perhaps pondering whether to take on e4, or, I mean, we might just see a simple rook move, maybe something like rook to e8 or rook d8 to just keep the pressure. And in a situation like this, sometimes you do want to keep the pressure to give your opponent options and just perhaps provoke a mistake when they're so low on time.
We do have another result, our first result of the day in Group A, as Yuri Kuzubov and Seth Rosen have gone to a draw. And so both players are now sitting still at the top with 2 points apiece. And is this something you want to take a look at, or shall we keep moving?
It seems like a very dry position. I think, okay, the position was a bit lively earlier. I was thinking it was imbalanced enough for both players to continue fighting, but it seems like, okay, both players just steered towards a very dry ending where black did have the extra pawn for a little bit, but white had activity, so what black decided to do was give back the pawn with this move b5, and as the rooks came off the board, this is just a dead drawn rook ending. So not much to look at, but perhaps there's some other more interesting games to check out.
Yes, let's take a look at Alexei Dreyev versus Eric Hansen, also in Group A. This is an interesting game. Rook and knight versus rook and bishop and pawns on the board.
Yeah, certainly very imbalanced. I'm counting material here, and we do see that Dreyev is up a pawn. Seemingly a very nice position for white, and not the best situation for the chessbrah. Eric looks a bit uncomfortable there, fidgeting around. Is that a Red Bull that I see on his
I think it is, yes.
table? I saw him drinking Coke yesterday, early in the game, which is normally it's something I don't recommend for students to do, where you have like a very large sugar intake early on. It can cause you to crash later on in the game. I usually prefer to drink tea or juice to keep kind of the constant flow of energy. But I know
maybe
everyone
he's not
has
drinking
their,
it. You know, maybe he's got
just
some
decoration?
kind of deal. Yeah, it's decoration.
Possible.
Yeah,
potential sponsorship, perhaps.
Yeah, he's got that Nakamura deal going. You know,
it's possible.
Maybe.
But okay, if we take a look at the current position, g5 was the most recent move. Actually, one more move has been played, rook to d3, and now we see Hansen is thinking here. Can't be too happy though, given that I mean, white has everything defended, and this knight is just quite powerful in the center. I think white is probably ready to play e4 quite soon to support the knight even further. Now, this isn't a pretty open position where typically in these endgame positions, knights are usually a bit worse than bishops, but this knight is just very impressive, and it seems like this bishop is just not really doing too much on a7. So I think this is a case where the knight is a bit superior to the bishop, and I would imagine that Dreyev's long-term plan is to someday create a passed pawn on the queen side, whether it be to eventually play a move like b4 to trade off the pawns, or maybe even to go after this a5 pawn, which is a potential weakness. I'm envisioning some idea like e4 followed by knight e3, followed by rook to d5. And maybe even later play knight c4. If white can continue to perhaps reposition the pieces and attack black's weaknesses, looks pretty difficult to defend for black.
This game, you think this game is one that's going to be going on for a while, but you definitely give Dreyev the advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect Hansen to give up so easily. I know he's a fighter, but I would expect Dreyev to convert. I mean, Dreyev is a very formidable player, very strong in converting better positions. And I've seen many of his games, and when he gets advantage, he likes to get that grip on the opponent. So I would be surprised if Eric can hold on for a draw from this position.
Also in Group A, we haven't taken a look at Alexander Lenderman versus Ray Robson as of yet, and there's still a lot of material on the board. Ray has down to 2 minutes left. The players have 10 more moves, about maybe 9, until they make time control.
And yeah, we should note this is an interesting matchup, a U.S. Olympiad coach versus a U.S. Olympiad team member. And we see Ray is wearing the U.S. Olympiad jacket, that I saw many pictures of during the Olympiad in Batumi just a few weeks ago.
But there's definitely some spirit there. He's wearing it every day. I'm sure he's not going to stop,
I see Lenderman wearing one of the St. Louis Chess Club rain jackets, which is quite appropriate for the weather with a hood on.
We have the best apparel here, man.
We do, yeah.
It's 2018 U.S. Championship rain jacket. Yeah, I think we still have some. You should come by and get some.
Yeah, there's some nice insulation.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we take a look at the current situation, I know Ray is somewhat notorious for getting low on time. And in this game, he's living up to expectations. 2 minutes left to make 10 more moves. Looks like one more move has been played by Lenderman, rook to h4. And I like this position for white for many reasons. I mean, there's some imbalances here, but white has a bishop pair. 2 bishops against 2 knights. Really can't complain with that. We see this double Fianchetto setup. And what this allows is it allows white to, at any point, play a move like bishop take knight. And when white is able to perhaps be the one to initiate trades, this will allow white to perhaps dictate what direction the game will go towards. We see one more move from Ray, knight to e5. And now, okay, both knights could potentially be taken. We should note that white's queen is currently under attack. I would expect the white queen to retreat in this position. I think what Lenderman wants to do is just leave all the tension and try and create a tense position where Ray could go wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a move perhaps like queen to e2. Another thing we should note is that black has some somewhat damaged pawn structure, somewhat ugly pawns on the queen side, double isolated pawns, also an isolated pawn on d5. And what this allows white is to potentially have a very nice square for the bishop on d4 to blockade the d5 pawn. Potentially very soon, we might see a move like bishop to d4, where the pawn on d5 is completely blockaded, and then black's pieces won't necessarily be able to activate further. So I do like Lenderman's chances in this game.
Very nice. We've been in Group A for a while, so let's hop and skip over to Group B. Chris Yu versus Sergei Azarov. We have not seen this game yet. The players are on move number 35, and they're both very equal in time. This is an interesting position, a lot going on here.
Yeah, Chris Yu, one of the youngest player in the whole event, only, what is he, 11, 12 years old?
He is... either 11 or 12 years old. Yeah, he was born in 2006. That's all I have is the birth year. But he's world number 2 for every player under 12. So
And he's higher rated than me.
in that
So
category, yes.
I beat him in a Pro Chess League game a couple years ago, but I feel like that might be the last time I'll ever get a chance to take him down.
Get them when they're young, you know.
We know he hasn't had the best start in this event, but he is very much a fighting player. And we see another imbalanced endgame, another scenario where it is bishop versus knight. Let's go back just a few moves, see how this position unfolded. We do see that Azarev has some very nice pressure on the c-file, and I mean, right off the bat, I do prefer Black's position, given that the c3 pawn is just a backward isolated pawn. It's kind of a nuisance to defend. Both of White's rooks are quite passive in this position. We see g3 played, and Black is now slowly improving with king f8, rook to d3, and we should note that this d5 pawn is also a weakness, and after king e7, Christopher grabs this pawn on d5, and now we might see a lot of liquidation. I can imagine that if knight take d5 is played, rook take d5, Black will win back the pawn on c3, and at first glance you would have to prefer Black. I mean, the rooks are a lot more coordinated, and it seems like Black is kind of crashing through, given that a3 and g3 are now additional targets to exploit. But I do see a nice possibility here for White. If this position does occur, I would expect rook to d3, just trying to neutralize the third rank, not allow any of the pawns to become too weak, and just try and hold the ground. And then it's a decision for Black whether to trade a pair of rooks or keep both rooks on the board. I would probably expect to move like rook to c1, forcing the king to move up, and then perhaps rook 7 to c2. And we see that Black's rooks are a lot more active than White's rooks. And it might be that Black isn't necessarily going for material so soon. Black is just trying to activate the rooks. And not sure if this is a big enough advantage to win the game, but certainly an advantage nonetheless for Black in this position. And we actually do see, I was predicting the future there. This is a current position, rook to d3 on the board, and I am expecting, let's say I was expecting rook to c1. We see Azarev has played rook to c2, which is perhaps an even stronger move, simply cutting the king off, and maybe even pondering the idea of potentially later rook e2 with mating ideas on the back rank. I really like this move, rook c2. Another example of a pig on the second. And this is going to be quite annoying for White because there's no immediate way to neutralize. One defensive idea that I see here for White is to play rook f3, attempting to go for rook f2, and then neutralize before Black can double up. So maybe there's still some chances for White to try and neutralize.
Eric, I don't mean to interrupt,
Sure.
but although I will. In Group
Go for
A, Hammer has trapped Daro's queen, and it looks like we are about to see the end of this game if they didn't shake already.
Ouch.
If we go back a move, actually, you'll see that Daro had to capture with his G pawn, but then another knight lands in, and I think the queen is trapped.
Oh, this seems like a dream come true for Hammer. I want to go back to where we last left off after bishop take c5 and just admire the initiative that Black was able to employ in this position. Knight g6, queen g5, and then rook f5. Seems like every move from Black is now either a threat or a capture. Black wins the knight on e4, bishop d4, rook goes back to f8. This is a backwards attacking move. It unleashes the bishop, targeting the white queen.
And it's over.
And we see a handshake. Yeah, very nice game from Hammer. His first win, right, of the tournament?
Yes, it is his first win, yeah. Lost the first day and a draw yesterday. We should probably get him in here if we can.
That would be great. I know he has a good number of fans in the Twitch chat. We can see, I'm seeing some more of Hammer emotes from PassPawn99 in the Twitch chat, and of course from Vertwitch too. Some Norway flags, so certainly a fan base that we can see. So yeah, it would be great to interview him today.
Yeah, we'll probably get him in here. Okay, so that is the first decision to go in someone's full favor in Group A.
Now, can we just admire the ending to this
Yes,
game? 'Cause
please.
I
Yes,
did
we
not
didn't get to finish. Yeah,
to
pardon
show
me.
it.
Yes.
Because literally every single move for like the last, I think, 5 to 10 moves of this game was just a monstrous threat. And okay, Queen H3, amazing move by Hammer. Knife F4, going after the queen after G take F4. Knife again, captures on F4. And this queen is trapped. Now it looks like the queen has perhaps a few safe squares to move to, given that all of these squares are undefended or uncovered by black. But all of these squares run into just a devastating knight to E2. And it's either going to be a fork or a discovered attack. So for example, Queen G4, Knight E2, black is winning the queen. If Queen G3, Knight E2, black is again winning the queen. And this is what we call hammer time. It's just putting the hammer down, and very nice victory for the Norwegian.
Yes, very nice victory for the man with the greatest name in chess. Okay, so while we are waiting on a potential interview, what game have we not seen yet? I think that we've taken a look at everything that was lopsided here.
Perhaps we can jump back to the Akobian game, because he is trying to maximize his advantage. And just going back a few moves after queens were traded, we left off around here. He played rook to c1, and then we see rook to d2 check, and Akobian to move, debating where to move his king. If the king moves perhaps to h3, looks like the safest square, then there's some issues for black on the back rank. And I'm not entirely sure how black is solving this, given that if the bishop moves really anywhere, then rook c8 is coming. And if a move like b6 is played, simply b4. Trying to discourage the bishop, or drive the bishop away from c5. If a take b4, a take b4, bishop take b4, rook c8 would be game over. So I'm not entirely sure, unless I'm missing something, I'm not sure what black is going to do after king h3. And actually one thing I do see, it looks very depressing for black, but it might be necessary, is to play bishop to f8, retreating all the way, making sure that rook c8 isn't an immediate check, and then to play g6. And after rook take f8, there's king g7 with the fork. But this looks very preferable for white. I'm sure white would be happy to give back the piece after something like rook b8, and then still have some advantage in the resulting rook endgame. Maybe there's something better for white, but
I understand
line.
we have Hammer outside the studio, so we're going to get him in here in just a moment. But yeah, let's continue looking at this game in the interim.
Yeah, I'm a bit curious why Akobian is thinking here. Let me just update the board. He's probably debating. What is he debating? Because if he moves his king to f3 or f1, then there's rook f2 check. And that would be picking up the bishop. Probably doesn't want to go into that. So he's probably debating whether to play king h3 or king h1. But both players not quite in time trouble. They still have some time left to try and figure things out. So let's move on to a different game and see what is going on in the Chess Bros game. A few more moves have been played. We see the last move, b4, which is an idea that I was talking about earlier, given that white does want to create a pass pawn on the queen side. And now we can imagine that white either wants to play b5 or capture on a5. I would probably expect black to capture on b4 in this position. And after knight take b4, white is having the passed a pawn. There would be ideas of rook d7 check, also knight to c6 check, some nice forking possibilities. But we will keep an eye on this game and take a look at how it develops. But in the meantime, I do want to welcome to the studio Yoon Ludwig Hammer, Congratulations on your first win of the event.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, what was the preparation going into this game? It seemed like just a very beautiful victory. I was very impressed with the finish of the game. It just seemed like a complete tactical massacre that White had to undergo. Take us through the beginning of the game. How much of this was opening preparation?
I played an opening I have never played before, thinking that after having a lost position in 12 moves with White 2 games in a row, it couldn't possibly get worse. And so I played this bishop c5. I was inspired by a game I saw last night. I was browsing the chess publishing website, and I noticed this idea, and that Kramnik had played it in Dortmund against Nepomniachtchi, and I thought, well, if Kramnik plays it, then he probably researched it really thoroughly, and so I thought, okay, I can play this, but I didn't actually do the job. I checked some of the main lines, and I assumed that, well, since Kramnik did it, it's probably okay. But already here, after b5, bishop b3 was the move in the Nepomniachtchi game. So bishop c2 is much more enterprising because it kind of forces black to stake a claim to the center with d5. And now when he played d4, I was already out of book, which is kind of embarrassing. But the thing is that there are some crazy lines starting with a4 instead of d4. There's a4, takes on e4, takes on b5, takes on f3, queen takes f3, e4, bishop takes, knight e5, queen e2, castles, and now if you take the rook, then knight d3 is very annoying.
Wow.
Because it kind of limits all of White's pieces. So instead of bishop takes a8, you go d4, and now bishop g4, queen c2, takes on e4, takes back. And this has been played in 4 games or something, right?
Oh, that's incredible.
And it's just, I mean, it goes beyond this, because knight f3 is the next move. Takes, bishop h3, takes on c5, takes on f1, takes back, queen d1 check, queen e1 to protect the bishop, and then queen takes f3, bishop e3, a takes b5, and I mean, still another 10 moves.
So you were looking at all of this last night?
Well, I mean, I wasn't really looking at it. I was just checking the games that had been played in this. And honestly, I don't think Black's position here is that good. I think this might, I mean, from what I could figure out, this position might very well just be good for White. But it's, I mean, I'm coming into the game surprising my opponent. I made sure that he doesn't play this with the black pieces.
Certainly.
So I thought it's a worthwhile risk. But the problem then being that when he played d4, reverting to the game, I didn't really know what was going on. I knew that this was one of the main lines, but I couldn't remember after what I played. Takes on e4, takes. Here, I couldn't remember what to do. I wanted to exchange the queens, but queen takes, rook takes, bishop g4, and I started getting concerned about f3. And I couldn't figure it out, and so I decided, okay, let's try to keep the queens instead. But I immediately regretted it, because I started to realize that after bishop g5 and then knight d2, White just gets a lot of pressure on the pawn on e4. So I was pretty pessimistic, but he was taking a lot of time to think, and then he unleashed bishop takes e4.
Was this a move you were anticipating?
I had not seen it at all. So having had that bad start with the first 2 games, I got a very defeatist attitude, and I just thought, oh my god, how could I not see this move? What is going on? I'm getting crushed again. This tournament is terrible. I mean, all those thoughts. But with hindsight, this was just a bad move. But also, after takes, queen d5. I mean, I didn't have to play as aggressively as I did. I didn't even have to sacrifice the exchange. What I realized afterwards was that even rook b8, queen takes, bishop b7, queen e3, and now castles. I think, okay, I'm not better, probably. Well, the thing is, I could be better if he doesn't get rid of the queens. He's struggling to develop his queen side. So I kind of think like he has to go f4 and get the queens off. But then knight g6, takes. I have a beautiful diagonal. I have the square on f5. I can get my rooks into the game way quicker than him. I mean, I during the game, I regretted sacrificing the exchange because I started realizing that this is tremendous compensation for a pawn. But I got to check the computer outside here, and the computer says I played it like a genius.
Really?
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was some sort of like deep opening preparation with sacking the exchange, because the amount of counterplay you got is maybe what we call accidental compensation, where you didn't see bishop take e4 coming, but you just had so many resources afterwards.
Yeah. So castles?
So do you think his first like key mistake was bishop to e4 going into this queen d5 line?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, the computer told me so.
I see. Okay. Yeah, we're not using computer analysis here, so it's hard to make conclusions.
Yeah, but here I really thought he should have gone bishop d4
instead of knight d2.
Yeah, bishop d4, and then my problem is that c5. Bishop takes e5, bishop b7. This is what I want to play, but unfortunately he has bishop d6.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I wasn't actually sure how to respond to bishop d4. But yeah, it's a cool position because I mean black is a clean exchange down in a reasonably symmetrical position. You wouldn't think that white is in this much trouble, but after knight d2, c5, it's very difficult for him to find any moves, basically. His problem is always that if he retreats the queen, well, now it's even too late. But if he does something like queen e4, he's always getting hit by f5, f4, and then the attack just becomes so dangerous. So when I played c5, I thought he had to play b4, which is what he did. And I was so happy with this move, queen d7. I think this is a fantastic move.
Yeah, it looks like a very kind of subtle, quiet move.
Yeah, well, basically, I'm threatening knight c6. And it's a threat that's very difficult for him to face. And also, if I'm preventing bishop takes c5. Because if bishop takes c5, knight
That's
takes.
very true.
This should be pretty good for me. And so yeah, I mean here he was down to just 1 minute for 20-something minutes.
And this is a great situation to be in when you have so much pressure and so long time.
It's connected. He's spending so much time because he is under so much pressure. And he couldn't find a good move. He played queen e4. I started pushing my pawn, getting that one involved, even winning a piece back. So in addition to having a dominating position, now I'm not even material down. And after knight e4, the whole game has been surrounded, being about the white queen and whether black can capture it. So queen d5, I'm not taking the bishop. I want more. And now if knight takes c5, knight g6 traps the queen.
Wow. That's incredible, yeah. Queen has no squares.
So he had to play bishop takes. And once again, knight g6, rook f5. The queen is in trouble, I think it's fair to say. And now it's time to take back the piece. And I'm still controlling his rooks. This knight on d3 is doing a fantastic job of making sure that he never gets any sort of counterplay with what is the only good thing about his position is the rooks, but they cannot get involved. And after bishop d4, it's all about just getting some attack to the king.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the finale to this game. It seemed like every move was just a very strong threat, and the queen was just sort of like a punching bag, just running all over the place.
I mean, here I could have gone
side.
rook c5, but I really like the aesthetic of just going for the checkmate and also trapping the queen. And
yeah, very beautiful finish, and probably one of the most fiery games of the tournament so far. Maybe not the most intentional sacrifice, but definitely worked out in your favor. Let me ask you, how do you cope with perhaps a slow start, not the best performance in the first two games? How do you sort of rebound and shift the momentum?
Well, I have a special method of self-pity. But I think there's no easy answer to it. A friend of mine is also a sports person, and was kind of saying, you shouldn't be saying this stuff. You're putting yourself down. You're an athlete. You're a competitor. You're supposed to kind of strike back. But I'm unhappy with my play, but more I'm unhappy about my tension, if that makes sense. I don't think that my attitude after the game can kind of change the fact that I'm playing poorly.
Makes sense.
So my main problem is not that I'm having a bad result, it's that I'm playing poorly. And I don't think this game was a fix, because I did not see, there's so many things I didn't see, especially this bishop takes e4. Yes, it wasn't good, but I should still be aware of it.
It's true.
But at the end of the day, points is what matters. Now I'm back on 50%. This was just a huge game. Winning with the black pieces against a strong opponent in this fashion. I'm ready for the next rounds.
Very nice. And I do have one more question, because you are a pretty notorious streamer on chess.com these days, and I saw you playing in the Arena Kings tournament just a couple of days ago, I believe after the first round of the tournament. Do you plan to keep streaming during this event, maybe to blow off some steam?
No. Well, basically, I considered doing some Arena King tournaments, but those clash with the tournament here.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think I did my last streaming from St. Louis.
Sure. And you do have a very clear fan base. We're taking a look at the Twitch chat here, and there have been the hammer emotes across the broadcast. Anything to say to your fans?
Well, thank you for the support, and I hope I can get another game like this. But this one was special.
Very nice. Well, I will let you go, and congratulations again, and best of luck in later rounds. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be back with more coverage from the 2018 Fall Chess Classic.
Welcome to the chess capital of the United States. The St. Louis Chess Campus, in the heart of the vibrant Central West End, has established itself as a premier global destination for chess and is comprised of two unique nonprofit institutions. The Chess Club and Scholastic Center of St. Louis is recognized as the top chess facility in the world and plays host to all major tournaments, including the U.S. Chess Championships and the Sinkfield Cup, one of the strongest chess tournaments globally. Tournaments are broadcast online to more than 150 countries, led by an expert commentary team of grandmasters. The Chess Club is an educational organization committed to promoting the game of chess, with a specific focus on bringing the benefits of chess to children throughout the St. Louis area. Research shows children who play chess exhibit improved analytical skills and increased confidence. The Chess Club is highly engaged with the local community, bringing scholastic chess programs to more than 100 schools, providing hundreds of classes each week. Directly across the street from the Chess Club is the World Chess Hall of Fame. This one-of-a-kind cultural institution invites visitors to experience chess in imaginative ways and is home to the U.S. and World Chess Halls of Fame. Cutting-edge exhibitions feature rare, historic chess artifacts paired with world-class art. Innovative programming explores the intersection of chess, art, and culture. Visitors can enjoy interactive programs designed around the exhibitions and monthly music in the galleries. The World Chess Hall of Fame is nothing you expect and everything you love. 3 different galleries and a premier gift shop highlight the culture, history, and creativity behind the game. Come visit, play chess, leave enriched. To learn more about the St. Louis Chess Campus, visit stlchesscampus.org.
A moment comes in chess when you need to test yourself at a different level. Chess 24 Premium offers the tools that you need to reach your maximum potential. From hundreds of interactive video lessons to becoming part of the Chess 24 community. You can analyze with friends or coach your students live. You get 24/7 coverage of chess news and events, access to premium analysis and commentary, and the chance to interact with grandmasters and other top players and coaches. Get advice from the best and even challenge them to a battle. Be the best chess player you can be. It's time to level up your game with Chess 24 Premium membership.
Be surprised.
And welcome back to St. Louis. It is day 3 of the 2018 Fall Chess Classic. I'm Ben Simon along with International Master Eric Rosen. And during our interview, we had a result in Group B. Steven Zirk and Akshat Chandra have drawn their game. But we want to turn our attention over to Group A. It's Var Akobian and Lazaro Brazon. Let's take a look at what's happening over in Group A.
It's true, and we were taking a look at this game earlier where Akobian was thinking after rook to d2 check. He did play king to h3, and Brazon played really the only resource in this position, bishop to f8. And after rook to c8, I was talking about this earlier where I would probably expect a move like g6 to prepare king g7. Brazon played the more aggressive pawn to g5, and now it is Akobian to move. He is able to capture the bishop, but then he would lose it right back after king g7. So the question becomes, does white have a way to really maximize advantage in this position? Akobian is up a pawn, but okay, the black rook is active. There is a threat of rook take b2, perhaps coming soon. There are also ideas of perhaps targeting this king on h3, as this pawn has taken away some square from the white king. Now, of course, a pawn like h5 would like to be played, but probably runs into bishop take h5. So it is a question, how does white proceed in this position? Do you take the bishop? Do you play something perhaps like king g4? And the players are still pretty far away from making move 40. They're on just completed move 29. So both players below 5 minutes, and I would expect some pace to increase over the next 10 moves.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, what we have now is a blitz game with a 30-second increment.
That's true.
I guess it's not blitz technically, but.
Now, I do want to switch to a game in Group B, which really caught my eye. Has liquidated a ton between Ashwin Jairam and Brandon Jacobson. Last time we looked at this game, it was some complex middle game. Now we're deep into the end game. White has lost all of the pawns on the board. We have a material imbalance of knight for 3 pawns with rook still on the board. And this is a type of position, it should just be a theoretical draw, but Ashwin having the knight will probably be the one playing for the win. And it's a matter of, okay, keeping the black king cut off on the 7th rank and trying to organize both the knight and the white king to perhaps later come in for some mating ideas. But even if black do not have any of the pawns on the board, rook versus rook and knight is usually a pretty easy draw at the highest levels.
So this is, you're looking at another draw here, draw number 4 in Group B.
Would expect a draw, which is an amazing start from Brandon Jacobson, being one of the youngest and lowest rated players in Group B. That would put him at 2 out of 3 points, and he would be on pace for a GM norm, given that most players in his section are Grandmasters.
6 points for Brandon Jacobson will get him a Grandmaster norm, and he just got the International Master title officially awarded to him at the FIDE Congress in Batumi several weeks ago, or more recent than that, actually. So yeah, great tournament for him to start out. I wonder if Group B will be all draws today. Oh no, maybe not. In Chris Yu versus Sergei Azarov in Group B.
Yeah, let's take a look at that game,
Yeah.
because black did have some pressure, and I want to go back to where we left off, because it seems like Chris Yu found this idea of rook f3, a nice attempt to neutralize black's active rook and fight for control over the 2nd rank. We see h5 played. h5 is a very typical move that you'll see in a lot of these rook endings, especially to try and undermine this very nice pawn chain. Black sometimes has the intention of putting the king on f5 and restricting white from advancing with pawn g4, and maybe even someday playing pawn h4 himself to perhaps induce some weaknesses. So h5 is a very classical positional move. Now we do see rook b to d3, perhaps centralizing the rook. Now we see a5, so Azarov is perhaps playing on both sides of the board. Sometimes in order to win positions like this, you do need to utilize some advantages on both the king side and the queen side, and we see that black's idea is simply to play b4 and create a passed pawn. So Christopher responded with rook to d5, skewering the pawns, and black defends with rook to b2. Not only defending b5, but having the very nasty threat of either rook to c2 or even rook c1 invading with the other rook. So that prompted Christopher to play rook to f2, and now it is Azarov's move. And after the rook moves to f2, this leaves the 3rd rank open for the black rook. I wouldn't be surprised here if we see a move like rook to b3. And these pawns on the 3rd rank, actually all of the pawns on the 3rd rank for white, seem quite vulnerable. And okay, the black rook is somewhat tied down to defending b5, but black could potentially double up on the 3rd rank with a move coming like rook c to c3. And I would not be too happy if I were white in this position. Seems like black's pressure is increasing. And I really like the way Azarov is playing, given that he's been kind of poking around, maneuvering his rooks, and it seems like now he's just finally increasing the pressure to a point where he might be very soon winning a pawn.
In Group A, the oldest player in the field, Alexei Dreyev, has progressed his 2 versus 1 pawn situation on the A and B files. The pawns have been traded, and now there is a passed A pawn, and he looks pretty good against Eric Hansen.
Yeah, it looks like a great position. There's still work to be done, given that Hansen does have the blockade on a7, but really have to admire the setup by white in this position. This knight is very still beautifully placed on d5, and now it's a matter of trying to advance this a pawn even further, and perhaps trying to remove the bishop from a7. Could imagine that white is probably pondering ideas of rook b3 followed by rook to b7 with an attempt to remove the bishop. And I'm not sure how black would respond to this, given that the rook can't move back to e7. The knight is just so effective on d5. Now this was not played. Instead, Dreyev did capture on g5 first. H take g5 and f take g5 was played. And now white has 2 passed pawns, actually. Pawn on e4, Maybe not the strongest pass pawn, but it's a pass pawn nonetheless. And okay, there's still this idea of rook b3, rook b7, and I'm still not sure how Hansen will deal with this. We see Dreyev played rook c3, very similar idea, threatening rook to c7. Seems like there's a lot of pressure, and we might get a situation where the bishop may end up having to sacrifice itself for the a-pawn. Now, I should note here that if Black could somehow sacrifice the bishop for all of White's remaining pawns, we could see something very similar to the Ashwin game, where it would be rook and knight versus rook. That would be a dream scenario for Hansen, but I don't think he'll be able to achieve that because it's very hard to remove this very well-defended pawn on e4. So I do like Dreyev's chances, especially because they've made time control too. So there is time to perhaps figure out the best endgame technique for White.
I think we're caught up on all the games right now. We might glance at Lenderman Robson in just a bit, but there are a lot of big upcoming events here at the St. Louis Chess Club that we will be broadcasting to you. And I'd like to tell you about our upcoming schedule. First of all, this is the Fall Chess Classic. But you're not going to have to wait until winter proper for the Winter Chess Classic because it's coming to you nearly right after this event. 2 10-player round robins, a 2,500 level field, a 2,600 level field. It's going to be great. $36,000 total prize fund on the line, and it all begins on November 5 at uschesschamps.com. The roster will be released and available shortly after this event. After that event, we have a Norm tournament. It's the 2018 St. Louis Invitational. Similar format. I believe the time control is a little bit different, but it'll still be 2 10-player round-robin fields. Some players will be going for their Grandmaster norms. Others will be going for their International Master norms. And, well, even if no one norms, we're going to have some winners. So that'll be a lot of fun also at uschesschamps.com starting November 16. And you'll note that it is the season of a jam-packed schedule because some of these events overlap. That day, those days during the Invitational, we will be having Today in Chess, and for very good reason. Because in London, the World Chess Championship is on the line. In a 12-game match, Magnus Carlsen defends against Fabiano Caruana. He's the first American to go for the lineal World Chess Championship since Bobby Fischer in 1972. And each day that there is a game in the match, we will have abbreviated coverage. The match goes from November 9th until the 28th, and I think it could go past that if they have a playoff, Eric. So that'll be a lot of fun. You'll be able to watch that on our YouTube channel. For more information on that, stlouischessclub.org. But that's not all Today in Chess will be covering, because also, besides the match championship, we'll be having the Women's World Chess Championship. And if you're thinking, well, I thought there was a match earlier this year, you're right. And there's a tournament again. This is the first year there will be 2 Women's World Chess Championships since 1937. Okay, 81 years. But this will be a 64-player knockout, similar to the World Cup. And Ju Wenjun will be defending her title with no special privileges. She'll be seeded into that 64-player knockout. Brutal stuff, and it's certain to be very exciting chess. That goes. That starts on November 2, but we will be recapping that starting on November 9 when we're talking about the World Chess Championship. The Women's World Championship is in Russia, in Khanty-Mansiysk, actually. And then after that, well, we're not done yet. The year continues because it's the London Chess Classic. To be specific, the Grand Chess Tour Finals at the London Chess Classic, once again in London, from December 11th to the 17th. We know the top 4 players in the Grand Chess Tour. They will be competing in a miniature knockout. And yes, that includes Fabiano Caruana, who may be the world champion, just sticking around in London a little bit longer, where it's going to be a mix of classical, rapid, and blitz games, all rated by the Universal Rating System. $300,000 prize fund on the line, and the winner will be the ultimate winner of the 4th annual Grand Chess Tour. And for more information on that, grandchesstour.org. Whew, Eric.
It's a lot of chess to look forward to.
And that's just 2018, man. We're not even looking at 2019 yet.
I mean, that's just what, like a month and a half of events that if you're a chess fan and even if you're not in the area of St. Louis or London, I mean, there's going to be some spectacular shows to watch online. So really a golden age of chess to watch so many different broadcasts, and I'm going to be looking forward to that myself.
Yeah, live in the now. This is the glory days, okay? So we only have a few minutes left in this show, but we have 5 games remaining, and I'm seeing a whole lot of white in the meter for Dreyev versus Hansen. Did you want to look at Lenderman versus Robson last time? I think it's been a little bit since we've seen it.
Yeah, let's check it out because a lot has come off the board since we last saw this game. And if we count the pawns, it's 3-on-2, both rooks still on the board. Lenderman clearly playing for a win in this position. The rooks are beautifully coordinated on the 7th rank, and it seems like black is a bit more passive, very passive rook on g8. And rook on b2, a bit more active, but especially in endgames where there's 2 rooks on the board for each player, you really want to make sure that your rooks are coordinated, are kind of speaking with each other, working towards some common goal. And in this case, it seems like the goal for white is just to start advancing this past b pawn. It is an outside pass pawn, and Ray is going to be on the defensive for the rest of this game. Now, it is a question of whether Lenderman can actually convert. Once this pawn gets to b6, it gets a bit awkward for white how to advance it further, given that the rook on b2 is putting constant pressure along the b file. So I'm imagining some plan for white of eventually putting the rook on e6, defending b6, and then shifting the other rook over to allow the b pawn to advance. But whenever this rook on b7 removes itself, this could allow some idea of rook to b8. So we will have to keep an eye on this. I'm expecting this game to go at least another half hour to hour, if not longer, given both players still have a lot of time on their clock. In addition to the 30-second increment, this could be one of the longest games of the round.
Okay, we have time for a last glance. Which game do you want it to be, Eric? Dreyev Hansen is looking like it. Maybe there's some more play here, but yeah, it looks like Dreyev totally has it with that a pawn.
Let's take a last glance at the Hansen game. I know the Twitch chat is always rooting for the chess bra, at least in most cases, and you can see the chess bra is fighting for his life in this game. After rook c6 check, let's actually go back. After rook c3, we saw g4 check, king f4, and bishop to b8, anticipating this idea of rook to c7 to enable the pawn to advance. So this prompted Dreyev to play rook c6 check, and after rook e6, this is a counter check. Did Dreyev miss this? I didn't see this at first, but this is a discovered attack where this bishop on b8 was aligned with the king, and rook e6 not only blocks the check of the black king, but unleashes a bishop. And now how does white deal with this?
If you block the check with e5, and then rook takes, there's a fork,
pawn
right?
e5. Yeah, rook takes e6. Knights are tricky. Knight e7 is a fork. And this would be winning for white, given that after knight takes c6, there would be the unstoppable threat of a7. That's a good point. But if e5 is played, maybe bishop take e5 with check. The white king would have to move. We could imagine that this rook probably has to take on c6, and then still knight e7. The king would move, knight take on c6, and this would be winning for white. So maybe Dreyev did not blunder, but maybe he saw this all ahead of time. But he is thinking in this position, which is perhaps a bit surprising, because what else can he play other than e5? If we go back to the current position, I mean, maybe he's thinking of rook c7 with some idea that after bishop takes c7, knight takes c7, again, this pawn is about to score a touchdown, and the rook is in no good position to stop it. So perhaps there's still a decision here, but he does have enough time on his clock. I do like e5. I think e5 should lead to a relatively simple conversion, maybe black would be best off playing king f7, but then, okay, rook take e6, or even rook c8 ideas as well. Well, let's say rook take e6, king take e6. Perhaps there's still some hope for Hansen in this position, given that the knight and the pawn are under attack, and black would love to take the pawn with check. Dreyev played another move that is actually much simpler that neither of us really considered, just bringing the king back to e3, utilizing the same idea of if rook takes e6, then knight e7, and yeah, this should be winning for white. So I do like king e3, and I still very much like Dreyev's chances to come out on top. But even in the endgame, we can see there's these tactical lines where you can never let your guard down, and you have to be constantly calculating to look at the concrete variations.
As we wrap the show today, let's take a look at the results we have coming in so far, starting with Group A. Now, there are still 3 games in progress, which is unusual based on our experience so far. We've seen a draw between Kuzubov and Setu, and of course Hammer has his win over Darrow after that beautiful hammer trap, getting that queen. And the rest of the 3 games are pending. And remember, if you're not watching on uschesschamps.com, head on over there and you'll see these games on the digital boards live. And now let's take a look at the B group results today. This is unusual so far, all draws, but it may not end up that way for the remaining games. Well, Eric, any final thoughts on the day?
I mean, I'm looking forward to staying inside and continuing to watch these games as they unfold. I'll be taking a look at the continual coverage of the online broadcast on. I'll probably look at the games on lichess.org, especially with these later end games. You can start using the table bases to determine which side is winning. But of course, viewers can also check out chess24.com and the main website, uschesschamps.com, to follow all the coverage.
Whatever floats your boat. And this broadcast was produced by the world's greatest production B team. That's B for best. Tammy Hyde is the streamer, Isaac Schrantz is the audio and graphics man, and our technical director is Danny Machuca. For International Master Eric Rosen, my name is Ben Simon. We will see you tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Central, but remember the games start at 1, so you can check them out early at uschesschamps.com. Until tomorrow, we say so long from the Show Me State. This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.